Okay, a couple of my students have asked me questions about submitting homework where they need to have a Jupyter Notebook with an image in it. So I want to create a quick video in response to that concern. Some of my students have just copied and pasted images into Jupyter Notebooks. I don't know if that always works. I don't know if that's really robust. And I personally don't prefer that because a lot of times I want to change my images multiple different times before I'm ready for some kind of final documentation, and I don't want to have to copy and paste it each time. So if I can have the image be a path, then updating the image would automatically update in the Jupyter Notebook, which I really like. So one of the first things we would have to do is know the path to the image, and then there's basically two ways to do this. One is to use a relative path and then make sure that the notebook and the image always stay together, which would be fine if you were submitting your homework via Git or something, or you could somehow make sure that the recipient always had the notebook and the image. That will get a little clunky if you're not using Git and you're having to email bunches of images or something. So we'll talk in a minute about how to instead take an image on Google Drive and convert it to a path that other people can use. So step one, make sure that you convert the cell to a markdown cell. So I hit the escape button to get into command mode. I hit the letter M, and you'll see that the number went away, and then I hit enter again. Oh, I guess I forgot. The first thing I did was just do an ls star.jpg, which is a list command to make sure I know the path and the proper name of my image. Then I'm just going to use HTML code. So img for image, the less than sign to show the start of an HTML chunk. I'm going to specifically hard code a width, which would maybe drive some HTML purists a little crazy. And then I hit Shift Enter, and it has no trouble loading this spectacular image. From my local, like I said, that's easy as long as this JPEG is always in the same folder as this Jupyter Notebook. Now, there would be no problem with jumping over here and creating a subfolder, maybe called figs or something. I could then put negative rotation inside of figs just to kind of clean up my life a little bit, and then I could do that and everything is happy. But again, I've actually now made it even slightly more complicated in that the person who has the notebook has to also have the image inside the figs folder. And again, that's easy as long as everybody's using Git. If they're not using Git, then this isn't going to work. So that's what I would call the relative image path approach. Works just fine as long as the recipient has the notebook and the image and has the image in the correct folder, location, whatever, with respect to the notebook. So that's a decent approach. Perfect. There's actually nothing wrong with that approach if you're using Git to submit your homework so that your teacher would automatically get the files and folders and everything in the correct location. If you don't want to do that, or you just want to be able to share your notebook without having to also have the other person share the images, then we move on to a second approach. I have written a little module that I call Blackboard Utils because I originally started doing this to get Google Drive and Blackboard to play nicely together. The name of it is kind of irrelevant. It's on my GitHub repository, and I'll see if I can find a link to that. But it has a function called Jupyter Notebook G Drive Image Link, and you could use some double question marks to look at the source of that. Basically, the big idea is that this will work just fine as kind of like the pattern of how to do one of these things. And all we need is the Google image ID. And Google, based on security purposes, has these things super crazy long and totally random so that nobody could arbitrarily guess one. So you need to find that for your image. Your image needs to be set to share so that anyone with a link can view. And then you also need a width, and I've got a default width of 300. Maybe that's great, maybe it's not. So if I were going to do this and I had some figure out on my Google Drive and I came over here, and it doesn't matter, just pick one. I'm going to right click or two-finger tap on that, and I'm going to hit share. Now, one thing I'm not a super big fan of is Google recently seems to have changed their security. They didn't want to make the links so that anybody could view them. I don't think that's great for my purposes here, so I've always got to do this extra step now. Now it's a link that anybody who has it can view. Is that less secure than someone having to have me specifically share them with them? Yes. But if I've got to share this image with all of my students in every class, that's going to get old fast. So I'm copying that link, and it has the ID, but it's not quite in the format that we need. So then I use this input path so that I can paste that ID and into that box, and then I just kind of print it to verify that it works. And so the ID ended in capital Y, lowercase r, L. Yep. Then I pass it into my function, and my function grabs that ID and substitutes it into the known working form. Now you could at that point simply copy and paste that into a markdown cell and it would work. But if you were willing to take the time to also install Paperclip, which is a Python clipping module, you can then just take this code, directly pass it into Paperclip, and now it's on my clipboard waiting for me to copy and paste. Again, convert the cell to markdown and paste it, and as soon as it finds that image, bam, it's loaded the image from my Google Drive, and now I can send this to anybody, and anybody can see the image without having to have the image themselves. It will just automatically load from my Google Drive into their browser. So this would be my most robust, most recommended way of sharing Jupyter Notebooks that have images. Hopefully that's helpful. Thanks.